Hi guys, did the head of the TUV try to justify the riots that took place in Northern Ireland last month? So Jim Allister, the only MP representing the traditional Unionist voice, stood up in the House of Commons and condemned the violence. However, he went on to ask a question about the Windsor Framework and how it's impacting the UK government's right to implement changes to immigration rules and ultimately UK sovereignty. Is Jim trying to suggest that the Windsor Framework was to blame for loyalist thugs burning businesses and intimidating asylum seekers in Belfast?
Thank you, Madam Deputy Speaker. I join in the condemnation of the thuggery and violence that we all saw and deplored. But could I take the Home Secretary back to the point alluded to by the Honourable Member for East Belfast? Is she comfortable with the fact that under the Windsor Framework, any immigration policy that she devises must pass through the filter of EU law and is subject to the requirements of EU law? How could a Home Secretary implement a national policy so long as that prevails? And will she act with this government in setting aside that which they inherited from the Tory government, that imposition of the loss of sovereignty over immigration and so many other matters as far as Northern Ireland is concerned?
Well, I would say to the honourable members, there will be many opportunities in this House to talk about the details of immigration policy, and I will certainly do that and to discuss those issues further with him, be it around the border security, be it around wider issues on immigration policy. Very happy to do so. This statement obviously was about the violent disorder that we saw this summer and how we ensure that cannot be repeated, how we make sure that we have the reforms in place to address that.
Okay, I can imagine Yvette Cooper thinking, who the F is that over there? So, oh goodness. Jim Allister wants to get rid of the Windsor Framework, even though both the Conservatives and Labour back in the day voted overwhelmingly in support of the Windsor Framework. Now, why does Jim Allister want to get rid of it? Because, well, it's implementing a type of Brexit that Jim Allister doesn't like. Jim Allister would prefer to see a border on the island of Ireland, not in the Irish Sea. Now, let's get to the point here about immigration. Now, the Windsor Framework generally doesn't deal with immigration. It deals with human rights and worker protections. Now, the reason why Jim Allister and some unionists are upset about this is because when it came to the Illegal Migration Act and the Rwanda Bill, well, it couldn't be implemented in Northern Ireland because it would breach human rights. See, the Tories were happy to throw human rights under a bus in Great Britain, but they were not able to do that in Northern Ireland because under the Good Friday Agreement, human rights need to be protected. So once again, the Tories in Great Britain were happy to run roughshod over protections for human rights, but when it came to Northern Ireland, they couldn't do that, so they were restricted in implementing. It's nothing to do with the EU, it's to do with the Windsor Framework and the Good Friday Agreement. Now, of course, Jim Allister doesn't care about human rights. He wants fewer human rights in Northern Ireland, like what the Tories were trying to implement in Great Britain. There's an Irish Sea border to protect human rights as well. It's not just coming down to trade. The Windsor Framework is mainly about trade, but it's more the Good Friday Agreement that's been protected by the Windsor Framework that is protecting human rights in Northern Ireland from the Tories, for example, in the last Parliament, and Labour if they are trying to undermine human rights, which I hope they won't be. Let me know in the comment section, guys, what you think. As always, your comments are greatly appreciated. Thanks a lot. Oh yes, and back to the point about defending loyalists. Well, is this a justification for loyalists to intimidate asylum seekers and business owners in Belfast because some loyalists don't like the Windsor Framework?